I'm Andrew Wang, Senior Audit Specialist with ADB, Office of the Auditor General, and I'm honored to be the moderator of this session. We will have 30 minutes presentation and followed by 25 minutes Q&A. During the presentation, if you have questions, just as I mentioned, please feel free to use the app Q&A session, and you can key in the question already, or like the question which already submitted by the other participants. And make sure you select the correct session. I just want to emphasize that. Okay. Our topic today of this session is implementing continuous monitoring, laying the groundwork for robotic process automation. We are glad to have the field expert, Mr. Robert Liu from ACL Services, and to share his insight with us today. And first, allow me to briefly introduce Robert. Robert has been a solution consultant with ACL, architecting strategic governance solutions and integrating technology platforms across the globe. In his role, he worked closely with ACL customers to implement all aspects of the ACL platform for risk, audit, compliance, IT, and operation functions in a variety of industries, including service, manufacturing, and government agencies. He also provides advisory services for audit management professionals for data risks. Robert now plays a key role in leading the market strategies for ACL and oversees the success of the customers for Asia-Pacific region. Before I hand over the floor to Robert, I'd also like to briefly share our experience here in OAG on implementing continuous monitoring program using ACL. In OAG, we also adopted ACL as an analytical platform to devise our continuous monitoring program on treasury transactions. Every day, the platform obtains and processes treasury transaction data from multiple source systems, either through direct database connection or interim extracted files in various formats such as text, XML, or Excel. The schedule script will then conduct the predetermined tests, and finally, the daily exception report will be sent to the end users through email or posted in the ACL Exchange web portal. The continuous monitoring program is well received by our client, and we are constantly seeking opportunities and technologies to improve our continuous monitoring system, such as fuzzy matching algorithm, robotic process automation, and machine learning. I'm sure we can all benefit from Robert's presentation to further enhance our continuous monitoring efforts. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Robert.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, welcome guests. I'm glad to be here today presenting on the continuous monitoring and how we have different strategies for deploying a continuous monitoring program. I know it's after lunch, so I'm going to do my best to keep everyone awake. I love these sessions. So first of all, I'm going to start off just a little bit of myself. So I've been with ACL for 7 years now, 7.5 years, and I went through the journey of actually implementing the ACL platform. So the risk-based analytics, automated analytics, audit analytics as well, continuous monitoring, workflow, dashboarding, and now our whole data-driven audit management platform and GRC platform. So parts into this is what drives a continuous monitoring program, and lots of different strategies to do so depending on your industry. And for banks, of course, it's the number one, where everything has to be continuously monitored on a regular basis. So the objectives here today and why a continuous monitoring program is important is that data is everywhere and it continues to grow exponentially. Internet traffic, internet type of materials, even types of social media data is growing at an exponential rate. And you need a better way to track that and not to perform analysis, but also to gain insight and raise intelligence. So how do you incorporate a data analytics practice into your audit programs? Is by identifying the right controls to monitor, to provide additional visibility, and then explore other options where you have other high-risk areas that you need to focus on. Now, how does robotics take play in here? This is something that's a bigger buzzword that's running around now in this day and age, not just incorporating data analytics into the audit process, but how does taking a robotics portion and the processes and automating some of those key activities. We're going to cover some of that today and help increase and achieve a continuous monitoring or continuous auditing platform. And we're going to share a little bit about the ACL's approach and methodology towards automation for key process areas. So big data in the audit space. So now in this day and age, this is what your organization looks like from a conceptual level, from the most key parts of it. Lots of different information, lots of different silos of data. It's all tangled into various webs, different departments, different entities, different programs and processes, and of course, everyone loves implementing systems. So that means you got 100, 200, 300, or even thousands of different unique, specific point solution to solve that department's problem. Whether it be a time and expense system, whether it be a vendor management system, whether it just be something that tracks receipts. It's all disparate. But your executives still want the same type of information. How well our controls are performing, what are my key risk areas, and what is the business doing about it? Are they following up on it? So all of these types of, call it big data, call it masses of data, data lakes, data warehouses, it's spread around everywhere, and your IT teams are doing their best to group them together for business operations reporting, or functional reporting at the finance levels, or even for audit to go test on the controls themselves. So how do you make this easier for you? Well, the active data analytics is taking a proactive approach and a targeted assessment of where you need to apply either just a one-time audit to ensure to give a reasonable assurance, or a continuous monitoring aspect. You could take your pick, but the building blocks are the same. You're going to have all the different types of data sources that we spoke about, and it could come in extracts, it could come in XML files, they can come from your credit card providers as well on their online systems, or portal that you can have to log into and download. Nonetheless, all that data has to now be sucked into this massive, complex, let's call it the data lake or data warehouse, and then make sense of it. So how do you apply this from a monitoring approach? Now the monitoring could just simply be something that takes your data, aggregates it together, and prepares it into what you call an auditable data universe. It could be as simple as that on a continuous basis. And then you provide your auditing practice or techniques on the prepared data sets or your auditable data universe. But what is the next step? What is the next piece that you now take that data that you've extracted? So first, you already know, is look at your audit scope for the year, for the 3 years, for your 5-year plan. Then you have your data requirements and all the different data sources you need to look at. Is it a system-based audit? Is it a process-based audit? Is it regulatory or compliance-based audit? You pick. Or is it a bottom-up approach where you work with the business to help identify the risks and existing controls? But when you define, either way, you define your scope, you define individual objectives, whether it be a system, process, or in specific types of control requirements or regulatory requirements. Then you determine your criteria and how you're going to measure that success and the effectiveness of those controls. Then you identify the tolerance levels, the risk appetite. And then you apply the automation, which you then work with the business to help monitor. The monitoring, you can design the auditing practice and what to look for, but it's a collaborative approach to the business that truly gives that monitoring effect and effectiveness. And these needs speak to each other, the data up to the actual scope and objectives. There's always a gap there, and understanding where that building block lays down is the most important part, and how it applies to the key objectives. If it's not aligned to objective, then you're not really applying the efforts in the right approach. So how do you use it to increase your coverage? Well, let's say your typical day now is to do a sampling, 10% sampling, or take 25 samples, but the demands of audit is increasing. That sampling 25 doesn't work. Looking at 100% is a lot. But how do you take a systematic approach to scale up to 100%? You work with the business and determine what that risk tolerance or what that risk appetite is, and you determine how much of that universe you should be auditing. So compliance-based audit may take a look at a manual approach, and you automate a small sliver of this. Then your coverage from your auditable data universe, or your audit scope, has only made a dent. But your demands are always the same. So how do you leverage technology to increase this? Then your risk-based auditing. Take a target, do your risk assessments, then you determine the scope and the coverage, and then you deploy your auditors accordingly. Taking a data-driven approach. I spoke about just leveraging data analytics to pull in, aggregating your data to create what we call your auditable data universe. Just that alone, on a regular basis, is already taking that first step. Use the risk assessment logic and drive an actual assessment using the data on 100%. That can be automated. And then you take your samples from that risk assessed approach, and that portion is automated, so the manual portion is actually the key risks that you've identified through the automated program, leaving you a smaller portion that has not been tested, has not been monitored or audited itself. So what are the three key areas for the continuous monitoring? I'm pretty sure you already guessed it, is the common triangle. One is your process. What is your process for acquiring data? Is it something like this, where your IT team is a little more protective? They think they control all the data. They're not sure or trust what you're going to do with the data. I see a few nodding heads here. It's seems like it's resonating a bit. It's speaking the right language. The objectives. What are you doing with the business? How are you helping them? And this is how you need to have the right type of conversations, because either they don't understand how the technology accesses the data, or maybe they're just saying it's too much work. I don't want to manage another user, or I don't want to manage another tool. There's got to be some common grounds for you to do your job without disrupting the business. So take a smaller portion approach by the data. Again, identify what's the criteria you're looking for. Don't go to your IT team saying that I just need access to this entire system. They'll probably just push you away. And then you ask again next time, then they're a little more reluctant to help you. Come with an approach, understand what the objectives are, determine your criteria for measurement of success, which is the measurement of how you determine a control is effective or a process is effective. Then you have a reasonable approach in terms of what risks you're covering, what's the frequency, that risk tolerance, of how often you want that data, and then you determine the data requirements. You don't need access to the entire financial system if you're just looking at the AP process, or an inventory, or just looking at your general ledgers, or just looking at expenses, or your contractors, or your HR. There's specific areas that you can focus on. Then you do your extraction. They could do it, or you can go directly, and we'll talk about that in a couple seconds here. Then you perform your analysis. Of course, you have your alerts and exceptions, and then you need to push it out to the appropriate businesses to take action. A one-way approach where you only spit out reports and tell the auditees that here's all your issues, tell me when you're done fixing them, is not a healthy relationship. This is the process. What's the process here? And you have to meet in the middle somehow with the business itself and take that remediation aspect where you've identified false positives, or you've identified that this is a low-risk analytic and it's not usable. Take that feedback in when the auditees tell you that, and feed that back into the loop when it comes to your data extraction. And maybe there's some logic you apply that says this is a lower priority. This has been identified before, but where it's not material, but we just want to make you aware of this. And you can group those together. So we have this methodology, what you call post-processing analysis, that takes the outputs of your results and compares it back to your historic results on a continuous basis. And then if it's a repetitive hit, we call those repeat offenders. And then you increase the risk level that way. Or if it's new, then you decrease it because they said it's a false positive. that, all in all, with that whole process is the continuous monitoring with the data analytics. Now, some people. Show of hands here, how big's your audit team if you're between 1 and 10? 1 and 10 auditors, okay, about 4 of us. Anyone from 10 to 20 auditors? 1 to 10, between 1 and 10 auditors. You're 1 auditor. In total. Mm-hmm. And then 10 to 20 auditors. Okay, and then 20 plus. Oh wow, you guys are lucky. How big's your teams out here? Spit out some numbers. 150? 50? 40? 400 auditors. Wow, okay, great. So now how do you define and how do you disseminate that team? It could be by functions, by process areas, by different objectives or risks, special projects, fraud investigators. Within that, is it everyone should be data analytic experts? No. But should they be aware of how analytics are applied? Yes. So there's typically this triangle here where 100% of that audit team is aware of how analytics are applied. So they can speak to the 20% of the teams that know how to script it or do it or apply it. And then you're going to have to reserve this other percent, this maybe 2% or 3% of your teams that is going to be your top data scientists. Those are the ones doing statistical analysis, the ones that are learning machine learning, the ones that are learning the Python and R and all these different modelings, deep learning, machine learning. Right? You can't expect everyone to do it, but they need to understand how to communicate. So does your team have the right skills to deploy a truly robust continuous monitoring program? Are they doing the right things? So we have this approach, what we call the super users, the data specialists, call them the data scientists. Typically they're broken down by 2 categories, the ones that are knowing the systems, the application processes, and the other teams are what we call consumers, your field auditors. How to apply or use the analytics in a process. How do you read the results? How do you pass that information back to the data analytics specialists to drive, let's say, a historical blending or historical trending model? How do they apply that into their model and determine its overall risk for you? So there's a collaborative approach of not just pushing everyone to learn analytics or learn about continuous monitoring. I had a team in North America as one of the banks for Canada, actually, and they divided their teams by pretty much like an 80-20 rule as well. 80% of them were the consumers, 20% of them were the data analytics. Of that 20%, they divided that by about 30 to 70. 30 is the one scripting, 70 are the ones scripting, and 30 was just managing the application and the programs and the administrative side of the automation tool. Because there are things like different collections of the programs, different field auditors, etc. So how do you build this all together and in terms of the overall success and assurance? We call it continuous assurance. There's lots of different areas, from a strategic line set, cooperations, getting the right type of technology in place, but you need to combine this together with 2 approaches. One, of course, is your risk-based auditing. Apply your approach, know where to go audit, divide up your work, and this is, of course, driven by the audit functions. Then there's continuous monitoring. Typically, continuous monitoring approach is governed and managed by the business, whereas audit comes in and looks at those controls of the effectiveness of the monitoring. And it's a combined approach. And with this is when you have that's called continuous assurance. And you have a clear line definition between what the business is responsible for and then what the audit team is responsible for. But both teams together are accountable for the combined assurance across the whole organization. And you can have that divided up, and what now the business becomes what you call audit readiness. The continuous monitoring solution becomes an audit readiness platform, and a really robust continuous monitoring platform is a control in itself. Now, auditors need to know how to audit a continuous monitoring program or robotics programs. So now comes the system. Do you have the right technology to deploy the continuous monitoring programs? We talked about all the different systems being approached and aggregated to one single source. So then you can combine multiple data sources together, disseminate from 100 set of data sets and create that auditable universe, and have a 365-day review of your controls, but that's for the business to monitor on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then audit comes in and just takes a look at what you did with the results and how you responded to them. Now they can take a sample of your continuous monitoring results. So there's a couple banks doing this, and Wells Fargo, which is the one we developed for, and is actually the one they have about 350 scripts running every single day, managed by one person. They just take the results and what we call manual review. You put it into a single file, and they put it to their dashboard, and then they follow up on only those ones. And they just have once in a while look at the continuous monitoring program, make sure the change management is effective, and then now you have a single person or a smaller team managing the continuous monitoring, and everyone else gets to focus on the other things: cybersecurity, information security, IT compliance, risk compliance, or expansions or acquisitions, etc. So now comes RPA. So how does RPA help with audit? How does RPA help with any type of part of the business? The definition of RPA, or robotics process automation, is essentially the title in its own. A step, it's a coded computer software that will automatically help you perform activities, whether they're risk-based or they're sequential. They could emulate someone's clicking through a web page. Those are process automations. Automatically downloading, cross-functional things as cross-applications. Essentially, think about your Excel macros, opening up multiple workbooks, doing some calculations, grabbing multiple pieces. But that is a form of process automation, but within Excel only. What it's not, walking, talking robots. It is not physical machines processing, let's say, paper or moving robots itself. Cars now use automation all the time. And it's not artificial intelligence or machine learning or automatic reply software. There's a different category for artificial intelligence. So where is it suitable? Financial processes for reconciliation, operational side of things for inventory variances or different calculations, the data aggregation and automated cleansing for BI platforms, information technology for access control monitoring, for instance, doing segregation of duties testing. This is where technology is moving towards, where more and more things are becoming automated. Now, there are risks when it comes to automation, because there's a consistent delivery cycle that you have, call it your key milestones, call those key output. Now that's going to be automated throughout the entire cycle to deploy, and going to have several risks with this. So for instance, there's going to be data privacy issues. Then you have to look at the controls that is being monitored with the RPA platforms. Then you have to avoid other ones, but it's a risk mitigant as well. You're avoiding manual handling of errors in the digital workplace. The time to competency now is significantly reduced. So then you have them knowing what do you do with the RPA results. Now, internal audit may have different approaches to it, but let's say automated for your assessment results, automation for controls themselves, automatically distributing control failures to the auditees. They're responding back and feeding that back into your response mechanism and automatically raising alerts and awareness and determining whether that control or issue could be closed or not. These are the type of things, or the data aggregation side. So when you're trying to automate and automate certain processes within the audit space, doing data analytics is the first part, of course, which everyone knows. Automating issue tracking or issue distribution or follow-up. But think about how many robots can you possibly monitor if you have too many processes automated. Which processes should you automate? Not everything can be automated, not everything should be automated. There always has to be a little human element to it. How does automation handle errors? right? Garbage in, garbage out. Everyone knows this. So how does the robot really know, is it programmed right? Now you're thinking about change management. Now you're thinking about how does people update the column, the logic of that robot, the automation. And what do you do with it if something falls in error? Does it go to a black hole? Or is there error trapping? Or is there different ways in the audit log to track that type of changes? Something to think about when you're deploying this now. So lastly, just want to finish up, is how does the ACL position and take an approach on this robotics piece? Well, take all the data sources that you may have on the left, which you can access from agnostically from any type of platform you have, and we plug it into the automation software. Taking that with the applied analysis, either using machine learning functions within the ACL platform, or taking an approach for pre-built commands, clustering recognitions, outliers analysis, and building the risk-based analytics within that processing engine, allowing that to be automated, and then pumped out through what we call a results management mechanism to distribute the findings, distribute the results, distribute the metrics, the different types of KPIs you need to monitor, the KRIs that you need to distribute to determine risk assessments, or the key control indicators determine pass or fail. And there's different ways to automatically distribute, which you can't read here, but it's the red items that distribute to either key stakeholders, instant alerts to the frontline operational staff, instant alerts back from what we call a survey, taking human interactions. And then we visualize this in the dashboard, which then you can feed that back into the loop of the automation platform, take that automation and feed it back into that logic, that continuous cycle, and what we call kind of scorecard analytics. So you can import from multiple sources that you may have. Excel, XML, some PDF files, limited text, connect into different systems such as your Concur, Oracle, ACPAC, Teradata, Hadoop. All these systems are getting bigger and bigger as data continues to grow in our day and age. So you need different ways to connect to it, but speak a harmonized, consistent language. That's that automation to harmonize and do what we call a common data model. And then you apply your analysis of the audit practice at the common data model. Don't let automation gather the data for you and harmonize it for you, and then automatically do the distribution. So the different content packs that we load with it, either ideas for doing automations, give you pre-built scripts that you can plug in and tap into your data, and then fully packaged areas that we deploy that focus on certain target areas, IT risks, application controls, even Active Directory testing, segregation of duties, and of course the other process areas, HR, payroll, accounts payable, etc. And then you automate it.